Welcome to the Sham Sharma Show. Today on the show, we're going to talk about American President Donald Trump's decision to change the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of the Jewish state. We're going to talk about what it means, why Jerusalem is so important to the people, and the repercussions it could have. So stay tuned, and let's get into this. Hello, and welcome. Welcome to a brand spanking new episode of the Sham Sharma Show. Thank you for watching. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate you. Now, our story of the day today is about President Donald Trump's decision to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and move the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. This is, of course, a very important step because Jews for a very long time have wanted Jerusalem to be the capital of Israel because it's a city that has very deep and a very storied importance in Judaic history and in Judaic mythology. Now, Jerusalem is mentioned hundreds of times throughout the Torah, which is the religious book of the Jews. The Talmud elaborates in great detail the Jews' connection to Jerusalem. However, in the Quran, Jerusalem isn't even mentioned once. King David, whose star sits on the flag of Israel, purchased the land from local inhabitants to build a temple there. It was the place where Abraham ordered Isaac as a sacrifice. It was the place where Jacob laid his head down and had the prophetic visions of angels on the ladder. All of these things that are very important events in Judaic mythology. And of course, the Jews have had a long connection to Jerusalem. It's been a story of, exile, destruction, and then reconstruction, because Jerusalem has been destroyed many times and has been rebuilt many times. There has always been a Jewish presence in Jerusalem, and there's always been a Jewish longing to return to Israel, to return to Jerusalem and to rebuild Jerusalem and to have Jerusalem as their capital. And this is something that is actually reflected in their national anthem called Hatikva, which means the hope. And it says, the hope of 2,000 years to live as a free people in our own land, the land of Zion and Jerusalem. Now, as I said before, Jerusalem became the spiritual and cultural capital of Israel when King David made it his capital in 10th century BCE. This is where he brought the Ark of the Covenant to rest as well. It was King David who had the idea to build the temple as a permanent house of God in Jerusalem as well. And this was something that was completed by his son Solomon. So you can see that there's a long history that the Jews have to Jerusalem, and there are parallels here, of course, with the way the Jews want Jerusalem to be the capital of Israel and the way that the Hindus want the Ram Janmabhoomi temple to be actually built at the Ram Janmabhoomi in Ayodhya. I actually think having Jerusalem as the capital of Israel is going to be good for the city of Jerusalem. It's going to lead to Jerusalem being more safe in general, because there are criticisms, of course, that can be made about the state of Israel, and especially when it comes to the settlements that they've been building on land that has Arabs living on it already and leading to those Arabs being displaced. And that's something that the international community can, of course, criticize Israel on. But when it comes to the Middle East in general, if there's one stable, safe country in the Middle East, it's Israel. That's one of the few countries in the Middle East that is actually run on a more or less democratic system. I think it'll be good for tourism. I think it'll be better for safety. I think it'll raise the profile of Jerusalem as well. And having Jerusalem as the capital of Israel does not abrogate any of the rights that Muslims have in the area. The Muslim quarter in the area will still remain the Muslim quarter. The Muslims will have the same rights to pray and go about their religious business the way they've had it before the U.S. recognized Jerusalem as their capital. Now, how did Israel actually come to be in possession of Jerusalem? Now, this happened after the 1967 war, which was also called the Six-Day War, where Egypt, in cahoots with other Arab countries like Syria, like Lebanon, like Jordan and Iraq, waged war on Israel. And in 6 days, Israel was able to beat back and defeat all those combined forces. And that's how they actually came into possession of the Golan Heights. They came into possession of the Sinai Peninsula. Because what had happened before that war was that Egypt was actually blocking access two ships to come to Israel, which were through the Sinai Peninsula, which was something that was very important for Israel to be able to conduct trade with the rest of the world. So like I've said before, I think this could be actually a very good move, and it's actually a smart move by the US administration in the Middle East as well. And I'll tell you why in a second. But first, I want to talk about the reaction in the media to this whole situation. And the medias, of course, they have every right to criticize the decision, or they have every right to praise this decision, because it's a free media and they have the right to do that. But what I've seen in certain sections of the media is that they have just taken a situation which should have actually been at a 2 or a 3, and they've taken it to bloody 10. And there's headlines like how the Middle East is going to devolve into war and chaos because of the decision, and how Hamas is going to launch, numerous terrorist attacks because of this decision, and it's going to be all, blood and chaos throughout the region. And I have two things about this. First, when you talk about, there being violence in the region, what was happening before this decision? It wasn't like this whole area was a 24/7 yoga camp, was it? There has been violence going on in this region non-stop, even before this decision was even announced. Second argument is that they're creating a situation where they're peddling this agenda, and they're saying that the situation is actually a lot worse than it is. Like I said before, the media has every right to criticize this decision, and the media can completely say that this might not be the smartest decision, this can lead to violence, but to say that this will lead to the Middle East devolving into blood and chaos and war and death, I feel like when you exaggerate and blow out of proportion a situation like this, and it's everywhere in the news, just completely blown out of proportion, somebody's going to see it, and they're going to think that this situation is actually a lot worse than it actually is, because that's how it's being portrayed in the media, and then they might go ahead and do something rash. And then this gives outlets like Hamas, which a lot of these media houses actually support, this gives outlets like Hamas just a shoulder to cry on and just a shoulder to fire their gun from. Because the media is saying, why can't Israel just talk to Hamas and find a peaceful solution rather than taking steps like this? Why can't the US talk to Hamas and find a more peaceful solution and find a better solution for the Middle East area rather than declaring these random judgments? Now, I'm sure a lot of us have seen, Hamas leaders and Israeli leaders meeting on the White House front lawns, doesn't matter what president it is, and shaking hands in front of the US president and signing a peace treaty, and like a month or even less than that after this peace treaty was signed, fighting breaks out again. So the question is, does Israel want peace? Yes, they do want peace because their survival depends on it. Does Hamas want peace? That's an interesting question, and let's look at Hamas's charter to answer that question better. Hamas's charter states that our struggle against the Jews is very great and very serious, and it also calls for an eventual creation of an Islamic state of Palestine in place of Israel and the Palestinian territories. So they don't want Israel to exist. When people talk about, there needs to be a two-state solution, Hamas does not want a two-state solution. Hamas also emphasizes in Article 13 of its charter the importance of jihad. They said there is no solution for the Palestinian question except through jihad. Initiatives, proposals, and international conferences are all a waste of time and vain endeavors. So again, all the times that you've seen all those Palestinian leaders and all those Hamas leaders go on and shake hands and talk at the EU and talk to the US president about finding a peaceful solution, their charter belies that whole ruse. They're not looking for a peaceful solution. The only solution that they're looking for is war, because they know that war is what's going to keep them in power. If they keep shouting that the Jews need to die and we need to kill the Jews and there needs to be this perpetual war fought against Israel and fought against the Jews until all the Jews are dead, that's going to keep the Palestinians and that's going to keep those people in the Middle East in a constant state of anger, and that anger is what's going to help Hamas stay in power. A peaceful solution is actually really, really bad for Hamas. Now, the charter also states that Hamas is humanistic and tolerant of other religions, just as long as they stop disputing the sovereignty of Islam in the region. I think it can be said without a shadow of a doubt that Hamas is not looking for a peaceful solution. Hamas is not looking for equality. The only way that they can live with other people who are non-Muslim in the area is if they accept the sovereignty of Islam in the region. It can't be a situation where the Jews can have their beliefs and have them being sovereign, and the Muslims can have their belief and have them being sovereign, and the Christians can have their belief and have them being sovereign. The sovereignty of Islam in the region needs to be paramount, according to the charter of the Hamas. So when people say, why isn't Israel looking for a peaceful solution, why isn't the US looking for a peaceful solution, is because one of the parties involved, the Hamas, does not want a peaceful solution. It wants the obliteration of Israel and the Jews. So I think that's what the media should focus on, that maybe it's time that Hamas changed its charter and maybe they tried to find an actual peaceful solution to this problem. And you'd expect that after this decision was made about shifting the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, if you actually believe the media, the situation would actually devolve into chaos and war and blood. But by and large, that's actually not happened. There's been obviously accusations. Some countries have obviously criticized the decision, as you would expect, like Saudi Arabia, like Egypt, and the like. But there hasn't actually been this declaration of war or this, massive upheaval or uprising against it. And I believe there's a reason behind that as well. And the reason behind that is because now, in 2017, Iran has actually become the foremost power in the Middle East. And unfortunately, the previous American government under Barack Obama has had something to do with it, because he actually was very instrumental in arming the Shia rebels against ISIS. And that led to Iran then crushing ISIS with the help of these Shia rebels and then gaining a more preeminent position in the region. And now that Iran gained a more preeminent position in the region, you've had the influence of countries like Saudi Arabia waning. You've had the influence of countries like, obviously, Syria and Iraq waning in the region. Saudi Arabia, whether it's Iraq, whether it's Syria, whether it's Egypt, they realize that if there is one country in the region that can fight and stand against the Iranians in this region, it's Israel. They do need Israel to be strong and thriving. And they need Israel's help. And they need America's help in this area to be able to then stand up to the Iranians. So it's become a very interesting situation where you have countries like Saudi Arabia and Egypt who are then maybe going to need to partner up with Israel. So it's a very interesting situation that's developing. I don't think it's going to be all blood and chaos like the media is suggesting that it's going to be, because of the reasons that I just mentioned of Iran's more preeminence in the region. I think it's a very good step that the American government has taken to shift the American embassy to Jerusalem. There are obvious parallels here with Jerusalem and Ayodhya. And, with this situation, we can only hope that one day the judiciary will do the right thing in India and a Ram temple will be allowed to be built in Ayodhya as well. Alrighty, and that's the show. Thank you very much for watching today's show. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did enjoy today's episode, make sure to like it, make sure to share it, make sure to tell all your friends about the Sham Sharma show, and ask them to come and watch, and ask them to come and subscribe. And make sure you're subscribed to the show's channel as well. Now, a brand new edition of the recap with Sham Sharma will be coming out on the Op India YouTube channel this Saturday, so make sure you head over to the Op India YouTube channel, subscribe to that channel, and watch the show over there as well. You can follow me on Twitter right here. I will see you on Saturday, and until then, stay healthy, stay happy, and I'll see you soon.